All right, well, good afternoon. I want to start briefly with where we are on COVID-19, and we continue to succeed, although we're definitely being vigilant for any recurrence. But the numbers, as you can see, continue to go down. 4 deaths in the last week. We've been basically averaging about 3 to 4 a week. It's a far cry from the 40 or 50 a day. The good news is that the protests in this city don't appear to have sparked an increase in infections. I think the protesters were very diligent about wearing masks, and I think it's proving how really important it is to continue to commit to the mask. We're seeing huge surges in COVID infection rates in Florida, in Arizona, in Texas, and we don't want to see that happen here. I want to talk at this point to the block clubs, the people in the neighborhoods, about something that, while I have not been able to do my weekly house parties the last few months because of COVID, I heard every single time I sat in somebody's living room. And that's the issue of alleys in the city of Detroit. In the last 2 years, we went through and boarded up 20,000 vacant homes. That was, without a doubt, the most urgent issue I heard every day, was the open and abandoned houses. Now, I think people want us to move on to the alleys. And so with the support of City Council, we are initiating an alley cleanup program, and we're going to do the first 500 blocks of alleys this year. And ultimately, we're going to get through the whole city, but we want to try this out. And so if you would like the block behind your house to be one of the first 500 alley cleanups, where we take alleys that, as Detroiters know, too often look like this, and clean them out so that folks can get through and you don't have garbage piled up. So if you want to be one of the 500 this year, what do? 1, you need to be a registered block club or neighborhood association. We are going to start with the first 500 people who have already organized. Second, you can go on our website and fill out our alley cleanup request form. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. And then the first 500, and there's more than 7,000 blocks in the city. We wanted to start with 500 blocks where the neighbors are saying, we'll commit to clean up if you come in and do the heavy lifting. We're going to have to come in with major trucks to haul the material out of a lot of these alleys. But we want to know that you're going to be committed when it starts to clutter back up, to come back in and keep it clean. And so you would commit to organizing 2 block club cleanups a year, maybe 1 in the spring and 1 in the fall. If you want to be one of those first 500, this is the alley cleanup form. You can go to the City of Detroit webpage, detroitmi.gov, put in neighborhoods, fill out the form. You can send it in tonight. And we will start processing these based on where you are, what the alleys look like. If you have questions, call your district managers. I know the block club leaders all know the district managers, have their cell phone numbers plugged in. But if you don't, on our website, on the neighborhoods page, detroitmi.gov/neighborhoods, are each of their names and their cell phones. So if you want to say, how does this work? What do I have to do? And the like, just pick up the phone and dial your district manager, and they'll be there to help you through the process. Now, if you're in a neighborhood that doesn't have a block club, and you say, my alleys are terrible, I want to be able to participate in the first 500, you can form a block club. And if you go to the same website, it shows you exactly how to form a block club. And you could actually form your block club and be one of the first 500 this year. I think we formed several hundred block clubs because we did the same thing with the vacant house board ups. We started with neighborhoods that had block clubs, and we had several hundred organized over that. But it isn't the kind of thing, the government can't do everything. So we can't come in and do this and not have the people who still live there be committed to maintaining it. So what's the timing? Our General Services Department is hiring 7 crews of 10 people each for alley cleanup starting in mid-July. It's going to be 1 crew for each city council district. So we are going to have a crew out in each of the 7 city council districts every day, just cleaning out the blocks of alleys as you have applied for them. The alley cleanups themselves are going to begin in August. So we're going to take the month of July, get the schedule in place, hire the staff, and then in August you're going to see the trucks roll out and see us finally start to clean this out. We think we can get the first 500 cleared out by the end of 2020. Once we work the bugs out, we should be able to do maybe 1,500 or so a year in the coming years until we get this city cleaned out. If you want a job working cleaning the alleys, in the next week, these jobs will be posted on the City of Detroit website, the Human Resources site, and they start at $13 an hour, an opportunity to go up to $18 an hour, and we will be hiring in the next couple weeks, and you'll be to work and on the job in August, and obviously we want to hire Detroiters to help to improve this city. So you can submit your alley cleanup form right away. The brains of this operation has been our Deputy Director of the Department of Neighborhoods, Ray Solomon, and he has, I think every day of his life, is interacting with somebody who says, I want my alley cleaned, and I'm going to let Deputy Director Solomon talk about how he sees this moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we are extremely excited, we being the district managers, the amount of calls that we get throughout the year asking for help for alleys. And then I want to recognize just the volunteer groups that over the years would come out and help us out to clear out these alleys. This is going to be a major help. So we work really well with the city council, especially this time of the year. Unfortunately, we could not do our traditional Motor City makeover. So this happening right now is the perfect time. So we'll be reaching out to city council immediately. We already had some conversations to talk about how we work through this. So I think this is a perfect time for this. Thank you.
So I think as many of you know, every week I try to sit in somebody's living room in a different neighborhood in the city. In my first year or two, the conversations were very predictable. The street lights are out, the buses don't run on time, get rid of the abandoned houses. In the last year, the number one issue has been the alleys. So that tells you we're making progress as a city, but it also means that people in this city are demanding the kind of services that you would expect in the suburbs. And I think that's a very healthy thing, and I'm really pleased City Council agreed to prioritize this, and we'll be moving forward. The next piece, for some people, may not be as much good news, but parking enforcement will start a week from Monday. And so the parking officers will be back on the job a week from Monday. So you have to go back to paying through the app or at the kiosk if you prefer. But that will be live again a week from Monday. If you've been putting out your yard waste on the wrong days, DPW is going to start ticketing again a week from Monday. And if you have not been maintaining your property with overgrown grass, cars on the front lawn, all those range of things, I know we've been getting lots of complaints about this. The inspectors have not been working because of fears of having them out to so many locations. They were at too much risk of COVID. Now with the COVID infection rate down, these folks will all be going back to work a week from Monday. So we're giving you a week's advance notice that we need to get these things back into line, and as we move back to normal, it is going to mean enforcing our ordinances. We probably have few issues more urgent than filling out the census. And right now, our status is really concerning. The state of Michigan has got the third highest census return rate in the United States at 68%. The people of Michigan are returning census at an amazing rate. The city of Detroit is the third worst of every major city, ahead of only Cleveland and Newark. We're at under 48%. If that does not change, what it means is in the elections in 2022, Detroit will have fewer state representatives in Lansing, fewer state senators in Lansing, and the suburbs and outstate will have more. A huge amount of the issues that people are protesting on that affect us every day are decided in Lansing. And if we do not get counted, we are now at a very high risk of having that voice be shrunken. It's not going to matter who your mayor and your council are if our voice is not heard in Lansing. And this is not somebody else silencing our voices. This is us failing to fill out the census form. So Vicky Kavari and Aaron Harris have been doing a great job, but of course, the entire door knocking campaign that we had planned, which we spent almost a year planning, was derailed by COVID. Starting a week from Monday, our census workers will be out knocking on doors. They are in the yellow shirts, so you will know who they are, that Aaron Harris will talk about in a second. They'll be wearing masks. They will come out with little tablets, basically iPads. You can fill out your census form on their tablet right there. They'll make it easy for you. If you're wondering, how does this work? How do I do it? They're going to come to your door. And we basically have 5 weeks, because in early August, the federal government takes over with the Census Bureau knocking on the doors, and they don't let us do it anymore. So in about 6 weeks, Donald Trump will be responsible for counting the census and the people of the city of Detroit. And I feel a whole lot better about Detroiters doing that counting in the next 5 or 6 weeks. So when you see the census workers out in the yellow shirts, please take the time and listen. And the person who has been coordinating this effort and will be out there every day with her tablets, I'm going to have Aaron Harris talk about what this effort's going to look like.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. So we will start our canvassing efforts on June 29th, which is Monday, and it will run through July, the whole month of July. We plan on knocking on 200,000 doors in the city of Detroit. 100 canvassers will be out. We're focusing on areas with low response rates and high occupancy. So currently, that's Southwest Detroit, District 6, Lower East Side, District 4 and 5, Northeast Side, District 3, and the Grand River Corridor, which is District 7. Our goal is to have 4,000 people fill out the forms at the doors right on the spot with tablets and phones presented to them. They will be wearing masks and yellow shirts, as the mayor said, and some will have face shields. We have 11 community groups in the city of Detroit that will be doing the canvassing. We are also continuing our efforts at food distribution sites and also at apartment buildings as well. So make sure you fill out your census simply by going to my2020census.gov.
All right, and so John Roach has just sent me a text. I thought I made this clear on the chart, but enforcement of parking and everything else is a week from Monday, June 29th, if I misspoke. One last issue that I want to talk to the Detroit bar and restaurant owners about this coming weekend. We saw a few instances last weekend that were very concerning. We have done way too much work to knock down the COVID infection rate in the city of Detroit, to have it get out of hand because of a few business establishments. I pushed very hard for the governor to open up the bars and restaurants in the city of Detroit, as well as the hair and nail salons. But we made a commitment that we would continue to honor the social distancing requirements. And so today and tomorrow, Denise Fair and our health department team, along with the Detroit Police Department, are going to be visiting a number of the bar and restaurants that we saw concerns with last weekend, to put them on notice. And basically, we're looking at two things. The governor's order indicates that your capacity is 50% of your normal capacity. If you're letting people in bigger crowds, you're in violation of that order. And your staff have to be wearing masks. I understand that people are going to take off their masks to eat or drink. That's expected in a bar or a restaurant. There's no reason why the employees who are moving from person to person and capable of transmitting the disease in a hurry should be without a mask. And so what is going to happen if we continue to see the violations is the health department will come and talk to you Friday and Saturday night. And if you are not able to enforce the capacity requirements, we'll be going into court Monday morning with the health department asking for an order for you to be shut down. And I want you to understand the implications of this. We look at the hospital reports every day. On a given day in the city, we have about 10 or 15 new cases of COVID reported by the hospitals. In East Lansing, in one bar, Harper's, 34 people were infected because they weren't following these requirements. You could have 2 or 3 establishments spark a new burst of COVID in this community, and we can't have that happen. What's going to happen is just what's happened in Jacksonville and a number of other places. The governor is going to step back in and shut everybody else back down again. And so I'm not going to allow a handful of people who don't follow the rules potentially to shut down every other business in this town. And so I'm asking for the cooperation. We are going this weekend to come in and talk to you politely and ask you to enforce. If you don't, we'll take the appropriate legal action. But we are doing very well in this city. And I don't think I need to remind most Detroiters that African Americans die of this disease at 2 to 3 times the rate of Caucasian. We have an obligation to our fellow citizens. And so that's what we have going this week. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can you name names of the bars and restaurants, and what are you seeing inside that's concerning?
We have some that I would call borderline nightclubs with dancing. That last weekend, particularly Saturday night, we had people clearly in excess of capacity. So we are trying the friendly way first. And so those folks know who they are. They're all getting visits today and tomorrow. And we're offering them help if they want help. But we had a couple where their own employees weren't even wearing masks. That, to me, is not a good faith effort to try to control this. And so Monday, if we still have a problem, we'll deal with naming names. Right now, I just want to get people back to work. And so I want to support these businesses staying open and continuing to keep people working if we can. Oh boy, ML, I thought you were going to pass today.
No, I'm deferring. I'm deferring to my colleague, Mr. Lay. ML Elric, Detroit Free Press. Mr. Mayor, with the cleanup of the alleys, what happens to the alley afterward? Is that now split between the homeowners on either side of it? Is it still city property? Does it become parkland?
That's a great question. And so longtime Detroiters will remember that when I was a kid in this town, you'll remember this, the garbage trucks used to come down the alleys. And then about 40 years or so ago, the city moved the garbage trucks to the street. And the city actually gave the alleys back to the adjoining property owners. So in the great majority of neighborhoods in this city, the property owners each own half the alleys and are responsible for half the alleys. Now, in some cases, you still have garages that open up on that alley. So it's semi-public. And the thing that I always hear is, when I talk to the neighbors, I said, you're responsible for your alley. I said, yeah, but a quarter of the lots are vacant. The land bank owns them. Aren't you responsible for those? And the answer is, yes, we are. And so we have a responsibility too. In a number of neighborhoods in this city, neighbors have pushed the fences all the way back. They've taken the extra 6 or 9 feet of land for their backyard. They're entitled to do that. In some neighborhoods, the neighbors have gotten together and said, can we have a gate on the alley and have our neighbors have a padlock so that we don't have people coming down here and dumping? Those are decisions that are made by each neighborhood, and they'll do that in conjunction with their city council member and their district manager.
Okay. And in terms of those jobs, cleaning the alleys, will those be seasonal jobs, or will we have something for them to do when it gets cold out?
So we have never found any shortage. The folks that we hired, for example, to do the board-ups, we immediately had to send them over to put in the large dam all through the Jefferson-Chalmers neighborhood to block the flooding from the lake, which was great. Now we've got them out cleaning graffiti. So there is plenty of jobs. So the job starts out at $13 an hour, and we emphasize skills so people can get to become drivers and the like. A lot of the folks who started out at entry-level jobs now have good-paying, full-time city jobs with benefits. Some cases they've risen to levels of supervisors. And so this is, I think a good way, if your heart's in helping improve the city, this is a good place to start.
Okay. And as businesses start to reopen, are you seeing any positive developments that may offset some of the expected revenue declines because of the pandemic?
We're seeing lots of positive developments. You know, you just drive down Livernois between 7 and 8 Mile, all the cars that are out. It's very exciting. And as I've been in and out, we may have one exception down there that we're talking to, but by and large, the businesses on Livernois have done a very good job of enforcing the capacity limits. And we're seeing that start to happen in more and more sections of the city. Certainly in Eastern Market, we're seeing it in a significant way. So you got a couple things. You have to have your workers comfortable coming back to work. You got to have customers willing to go into these locations. And I think every day that goes by, people get a little bit more comfortable.
And should that affect the revenue projections you had? I mean, there were some cuts anticipating that you'd be losing sales income.
A number of the revenues are running better than we thought. On the other hand, the casinos are closed, and so that's running worse than we thought. So we're about where we originally projected, but the point at which the governor is comfortable opening the casinos at limited capacity, I think will be okay budget-wise. At the moment, we're not any worse than we thought we were back 3 months ago when I did the budget presentation here.
Okay, and on those budget projections, had that anticipated people continuing to work from home who may now be in a position where they don't have to pay Detroit income tax because they're spending enough time in the suburbs rather than coming downtown? Or
We haven't seen that yet. Whether we will see that at some point on refunds, I don't know, but it's certainly something we're keeping an eye on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mayor.
afternoon.
Bryce Huffman. I am with Bridge Detroit. And I apologize. I know this is an issue that you haven't spoken about today, but I wanted to ask you about facial recognition. I know you've been a huge proponent of it and Project Greenlight and using facial recognition in coordination with those existing cameras. But given that facial recognition tech is shown to misidentify black people, and given that this city is about 80% African American, do you still plan to invest in this tech? Do you have any discussions about what sort of oversight might be needed before continuing to use this technology?
So I would start with this. The Board of Police Commissioners last September adopted a policy which President Obama's former civil rights director for police called the model policy for the country. And let's be clear on what that policy is. I do not support facial recognition for surveillance. It is not accurate enough for moving images to match to anybody. And so we do not do that. The only time facial recognition is used in the last 9 months since the policy was in place, we have not had an issue. It's if you have a still shot that's straight on somebody who has committed a violent crime. We have mug books of, I don't know, several thousand individuals, and what the process does is suggest potential matches. There's been a lot of mischaracterization. Facial recognition is not definitive. It's not like DNA. If you've been over and if you haven't, you should have the police take you through this. They'll give you 3 or 4 images and say, these individuals have bone structure and facial features similar to the subject. That's a lead, and from that lead, you start to investigate. And there are protocols that before anybody is matched, even to investigate, 2 independent people at the Real-Time Crime Center match them. And then the warrant presented to the prosecutor is based entirely on other evidence that you develop. It is not based on facial recognition. And so I'd encourage you to talk to Chief Craig. We say green light and facial recognition. We aren't using green light for surveillance to match anybody to anything. We had a really bad situation here that was a function, I think, of not good detective work and not good warrant prosecutor work on a case that happened before that policy went into effect. But if you look at what's happened in the last 9 months, the police have had leads to some really good cases, violent criminals, and I am not aware of a single case in the last 9 months since the policy has been in effect there's been any problem.
Have you heard of the Robert Williams case?
Yes, and I'm very angry about that case, and I join Prosecutor Worthy in my apologies to Mr. Williams. But you have to look at the case, and the case, in my mind, is about subpar detective work and subpar warrant prosecutor work. Here's what happened on the case. In 2018, there was a shoplifting case at Shinola. In the spring of 2019, before the Detroit police had any facial recognition software, Detroit police had nothing, a detective from the 3rd Precinct said, I got this video, we should send it to the state police, they've got this facial recognition thing. They got an image back of a person. The precinct then called Shinola and said, we want to bring somebody in for an ID. A security guard came down. They put 6 pictures in a lineup, and the security guard picked the person who had come from the state police. The security guard picked that person out of the photo array. Now, here's the problem. The security guard who was there wasn't there the day of the shoplifting. There was another employee at Shinola who was there, who would have been the best witness, who had actually seen the individual. That witness never came down to look at the photo array. Second, once you have somebody picked out of a photo array, in my mind, because what you need for a warrant is probable cause, I used to do this, that's the start of the investigation. After that, you say, okay, I have this person. Do they have a history of receiving stolen property? Has anybody seen them with watches? Do you ask them whether they were even in town at the time? Unfortunately, the detective didn't do that. The detective sent the warrant request to the prosecutor. The prosecutor's office, their warrant division, is normally very thorough and outstanding, because there's no way a witness who wasn't even there during the crime, that ID should have been deemed probable cause. But somehow the prosecutor's office issued the warrant. Interestingly enough, when Mr. Williams was arrested, the detective who had been on it was off that day. He came in and looked at the video. And when he saw the video, he sent an email to the prosecutor saying, I think this is the wrong guy. I think we should dismiss this case. The prosecutor's office looked at this, got to a supervisor, and as Prosecutor Worthy indicated, they said, we never should have issued this warrant when you didn't even have the witness who was there in the first place. The prosecutor did the right thing and went and initiated the dismissal. In my mind, that is a case where we had detective work that was not up to professional standards. I think the initial warrant prosecutor was not up to the normal standards of the prosecutor's office. And so I think there are serious issues that we're looking at. But to say that reflects on the technology, I just don't think is accurate. It's like saying that because a detective and a prosecutor made a mistake on the handling of DNA in a case, you should no longer use DNA. What you need to do is make sure you have the right protocols, and since September, there are a whole series of protocols in place that this incident would not have been possible. But it's unfortunate that this happened before Detroit had its own facial recognition, before it had its own policy, and there really was no excuse for Mr. Williams having been arrested.
So in your opinion, should the officers who arrested him and the person who issued the arrest warrant, should those people have been fired or disciplined in any way, in your opinion?
They're going to look at that now, and everybody is reviewing what's done. I think the fact that the detective stepped forward and asked that the case be dismissed as soon as he realized it was a mistake, the fact that the prosecutor went to court on their own initiative and initiated dismissal, I think indicates that they didn't do it intentionally. But I know Chief Craig does not feel good about the professionalism of that initial detective work. I talked to Prosecutor Worthy. I know she doesn't feel good about the initial review that they did. Both have revised policies. Understand what we have today. In September of last year, we put a very stringent policy in place that has 5 separate protections that would have prevented this from happening. This happened before we had facial recognition at DPD. One, you have to have a clear video image. We did not have that here. Second, you have to go through the City of Detroit Real-Time Crime Center. Somebody from a precinct can't go to the state police. Everything is done by DPD in a central office. Third, it can only be for a violent crime. You couldn't have had a shoplifting case be used. Fourth, 2 officers who are experts at real-time crime have to independently confirm that they believe there is enough basis in similarity to move forward. And fifth, the warrant request is not based on the facial recognition. But we've had cases where a case comes through and one of the 3 or 4 suggested leads is a person who's a suspect in other armed robberies in the area. That says to you that may be a person where we should concentrate our investigation. And so what happened in something that was initiated in the spring of 2019 could not happen under the protocols today. That's not any comfort to Mr. Williams, but I talked to Prosecutor Worthy earlier today. She took me through her protocols, and she's confident that they couldn't happen on the prosecutor's side today either. So there isn't anything else to say to a man who got arrested who shouldn't have been arrested. There isn't any excuse for it. But the early days of DNA testing, there were these kinds of issues. The early days of ballistics testing, there were these kinds of issues. And what we need to do is make sure the technology is being used properly. I just tell you one last story. You probably won't remember this, but in the O.J. Simpson trial, there was an attorney named Barry Scheck who the entire trial attacked the validity of DNA testing. About 8 years later, I was a prosecutor and Barry Scheck was sitting in my office. And he brought in a petition to dismiss a case against a guy who'd been serving prison for murder for more than 10 years for murdering a child, and he had a DNA test that excluded him. And Mr. Scheck convinced me that this person had been wrongfully convicted years before. He proved his innocence with a DNA test, and it's the Innocence Project, which I'm sure you've heard of. And so when technology is used properly by law enforcement officials, it can make sure that the innocent are cleared as well as that the guilty are convicted. And what we need to do with facial recognition technology is follow those policies. But I believe this was a case where the issue had to do with the practice of the detective and the warrant prosecutor as opposed to any underlying issue.
So just to be clear, despite the fact that the tech has been known to misidentify black people, black and brown faces, you believe that with the proper policies in place, this technology could actually help solve future crimes?
You're asking the question the wrong way. I've never said that the technology identifies anybody. It does not identify people. I'm saying just the opposite. The technology does not definitively identify anybody. It gives you leads. You should not be basing any arrest decision off facial recognition technology, and if you do it in the city of Detroit today, you're fired. That's what the policy says. So I am not saying that it definitively recognizes anybody. It does not. And I'd encourage you to look at our policy, because our policy recognizes the fact that facial recognition technology does not definitively recognize anybody.
All right, thank you.
Annalise Frank with Cranes Detroit Business. Question going back to the bars and restaurants and the enforcement. Obviously, you mentioned Harper's, where there were 34 cases linked to that bar. What's the current breadth of Detroit's contact tracing efforts, and have you seen any cases leading back to a single establishment since Detroit started reopening bars and restaurants?
No, it's still limited at this point, and it's been mostly aggressive in the Detroit Police Department, Detroit Fire Department, and the like, and the Health Department is in the process, in conjunction with the state of Michigan, in starting that, but it is not to the point where you would want it to be able to quickly trace back to one of these bars or restaurants. But I got a feeling in the next few weeks we're probably going to have to be activated that way.
So, okay, so in terms of seeing if these past couple weeks have resulted in any small outbreaks in a bar or restaurant, we won't be able to see that yet, but you're working on it?
So what we see right now is every day we get the hospital report, and we can see how many people total were tested. So when you see 7, 10, 15 out of the entire city, there's no evidence of outbreak yet. But Denise Fair, and I'd encourage you to talk to her, is prepared because I think it's probably inevitable that there will be pockets of outbreak, and we want to contain them quickly. We have proven in our police precincts, in our fire departments, in our bus system, we've been able to identify them, trace them, and contain them immediately. And now we need to take the expertise we've gained there and apply it to the first time we see a sign of it happening out of a bar or restaurant. But as of this morning when I talked to Director Fair, she had not indicated we have any evidence of that.
Okay. And then you mentioned going to the establishments that you said you're not going to name at this point in advance of the weekend?
They're talking to them right now.
And so what will the presence either of health department or police look like over the weekend in terms of while these, late night things might be going on?
I think they will come in and inspect, and they will sit down with the owner or the manager privately and say, you appear to be in violation, you need to get this under control, and give them the opportunity to do it and issue a report on whether they do or they don't. That will be the intention over the weekend, and if people work in good faith to control it, we'll be fine. And if they don't work in good faith to comply with the governor's order, then we'll proceed to the next legal step Monday morning.
And what would be the tipping point in terms of violations, in terms of?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Lawrence Garcia, the Corporation Counsel, make that decision. But the capacity limits are very clear under the governor's order. If you're one person over, are we going to react extremely to that? No, but we saw some instances where people were far more than 50% of capacity, and we expect our business owners to follow the governor's order.
And any fines in addition to possible legal?
Yeah, I'll let the Corporation Counsel deal with it, but my issue is not to collect the money. My issue is if you can't control your establishment in line with the governor's order, you ought not to be able to operate it because you're putting the rest of the city at risk. And so the conversations right now are constructive. They're not hostile. We're just saying, here's what we saw. Here's what we expect from you. And so far, I understand the conversations have been going very constructively. We'll see what happens this weekend.
Okay. And then one last thing. I heard Denise Fair say on Monday to City Council that there are some preparations underway for a possible second wave. And I'm wondering specifically in relation to TCF Center, are you seeing an expectation that the lease will continue until September? Have there been any changes with that?
So that's the governor's decision. What I would say is I'm just going to give you my own belief based on my time running a hospital. And what I know is that pretty much every year you get into January, February, March, hospital beds in southeastern Michigan are by and large full from seasonal flu, largely with elderly patients. If our hospitals, if COVID-19 tracks the pattern of seasonal flu, we don't know yet that it does, but that's certainly a possibility, and we don't have hospital beds available, that's going to be a huge problem. And so we're going to be looking to do two things. One is we're going to be looking to talk about vaccines of the seasonal flu to keep the hospital occupancy down in the first place. And then the second thing we're going to be talking about doing is really being strict about enforcement with masks and distancing. And then we will see. I don't believe a vaccine will be widely available before January. Maybe I'll be wrong. So, but our expectation is that we are going to have to manage an increase in seasonal flu and COVID sometime in the latter part of this year. And that's the plan we're operating now. If it changes, we'll adjust the plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
他们是一群前线英雄，而你可以用一个小举动来报答他们，就是完成2020年人口普查。这些数据可以帮助社区规划，并分配资金给全国各地的医院、诊所和紧急服务。准确计算可以帮助公共卫生局确认所需资源，以保护我们的社区。立即上2020 census.gov 填好问卷，开展我们的未来。即刻上2020 census.gov/languages 回复人口普查。